Welcome to Power Play for September 5th. Well, it's been 24 hours of almost unprecedented political shock and drama in the province of Quebec. I'm really not sure where to start, but I better give you a summation, starting with the fact that after 9 years under Jean Charest's Liberals, the Separatist Parti Québécois reclaimed power last night in Quebec. If that wasn't dramatic enough, the first woman premier in political history in Quebec had her victory speech interrupted by gunfire. She was hustled off the stage by security as a gunman shot 2 people, killing 1. The gunman is reportedly an engineer with a fishing lodge near Mount St. Tremblant. His name is Richard Bain. If that wasn't enough jolting news for one day, just moments ago, a politician who was called Captain Canada and waved the Federalist flag in the National Assembly for 14 years called it quits. Jean Charest had insult added to injury by losing not only power, but his own seat in a region he'd represented for 28 years, federally and provincially. More in a moment, but Premier-elect Pauline Marois emerged this afternoon to react to the shooting and address the challenge of leading a minority government with the balance of power being held by the new and untested Coalition for Quebec's Future. Here are the highlights.
I am able to cancel the Law 78. I am able to cancel the increasing of the tuition for the students. I am able to change the law about the contract in construction, the Law 35. So there's many things I can do, and I hope I will have the support of the opposition. I will have discussion with the opposition because, you know, we have a mandate from the part of the population. And I have, and we have, not only me, we have the responsibility to serve the people of Quebec. And I will do that.
Well, as she was talking to reporters, Jean Charest was huddled with his cabinet to announce he was leaving politics without any regrets. Here are some clips from his final news conference.
It's been a real privilege for me to serve the people of Sherbrooke, to serve the people of Quebec, and to serve the people of Canada. We are all blessed to have been born in this country, to share its wealth, and we're blessed to have each other. I wish that every day each and every one of us could feel and understand how much of an opportunity it is for us to live here and to do our lives here. There's no other place that I would want to be.
Well, the Prime Minister didn't speak publicly. He did consult briefly with Premier-elect Marois, but his office issued an unusually testy statement to deal with the shooting incident. It reads as follows: "It is a tragic day when an exercise of democracy is met with an act of violence. This atrocious act will not be tolerated, and such violence has no place in Canada. Canadians can rest assured that the perpetrator of last night's events will face the full force of the law." Okay, joining me to try and make sense of some very baffling developments for their insight and analysis, Martin Croteau of La Presse is here, and Beryl Wiseman is editor-in-chief of The Suburban. They both join me from Montreal. Martin, I want to go to you first on this. You've covered Jean Charest for a long time. Did he really have a choice in calling it quits just a few moments ago?
Well, I think he did have a choice, but it was clear that if he had lost his riding, which he did yesterday, many people thought that he would step down. He was quite confident down the road in spite of his loss. He seemed to think that he was going to be able to overcome the polls that were not very positive for his party in the final part of the campaign. But yesterday when he arrived in Sherbrooke, you could tell he was very emotional, very touchy-feely, if I may say, when he spoke to his volunteers. Some people thought it may have been a sign that, you know, maybe he knew it was his last time in Sherbrooke.
Yeah, Beryl, what's your take on that? Mr. Charest, was he the person who lost the election last night, or did Pauline Marois actually win it?
No, actually, Jean Charest made a remarkable comeback in the middle of the campaign, and I could tell you, I think Martin was there that night. There was an incredible speech in Laval. It was the biggest rally And what we call in Quebec le feu sacré, the holy fire was there. The 1995 Jean Charest, committed, passionate, charismatic, and fully in control not only of the agenda but fully confident in his ability to persuade people. And he brought the party back. He has a wonderful ministerial team, but where the Liberals ended up, so far ahead of where the pollsters thought, this is to Jean Charest's credit.
Martin, I want to go to you on
Pauline Marois
what-
actually was a point and a half below where she was in 2008. So,
Yeah, right. No victory for
there was
her
no
in this
movement.
one in the numbers. Yeah, okay, Martin, like, how can she leave a lasting impact, because we don't know how long her term is going to go. She's got to depend on the coalition for support, and yet, so obviously sovereignty is not going to make much progress. The secular charter doesn't look like it's going to gain any traction with the other two parties holding the balance of power. What can she do realistically to impress the electorate before they do this all over again?
It's a good question. It's not clear how much she will be able to persuade the other parties to tag along in her agenda. Mr. Legault from the CAQ has been very clear. He will not be compromising on his desire to change things in Quebec. That's a message he has been hammering away at it in the campaign. So you can't really expect him to want to cooperate with Madame Marois for very long. As for the Liberals, who now form the official opposition, well, they're a federalist party. It's not likely they will hop on board with Madame Marois' sovereignist agenda and her policies regarding, for instance, French-only CJEPs, which has been quite controversial here. So it's not clear how long she can last or how much she can implement her agenda at this point, but it's certainly going to be interesting to watch.
Beryl, tell us about Mr. Legault, the leader of the coalition. What's he going to want from her to continue his support, and what is he likely to get?
I think they personally were worlds apart. There's a great deal of animus, personal animus here. I know Francois Legault. I like him, but I criticize him particularly for the stand on neutrality in a referendum. He would say, yes, I'll vote no on sovereignty, but I'm not going to participate in a referendum. You can't want to head a government and be neutral on the fundamental existential question of the day. But more than that, his leave-taking of that whole question, his criticisms, of course, not only of the Parti Québécois on sovereignty, but the Parti Québécois, remember, is a party that likes to style itself as a party of social democrats, but they've gone even further than that. It's really a command state philosophy, and Legault wanted to pull back from there. So there's that personal animus. Francois Legault is an accomplished man, both in the private and public sectors. He's not going to want himself to be seen to be compromising on fundamental principles that he's already broken with a whole group of people on. There's not a lot of wiggle room.
Okay, Martin, I want to get your thoughts on that. You cover this guy. What's he going to demand from Marois, and is he likely to pull the pin earlier or later?
It's not clear. I think there's one variable that needs to be seen yet. It's this inquiry into corruption that is set to start in 2 weeks from now. It could actually make the Liberal Party very vulnerable. Many think that it will be, tested by this inquiry. The Parti Québécois could also be tested, maybe to a lesser extent, because there have been allegations of financing around the PQ as well. So Mr. Legault might be in a hurry to make the election, to pull the trigger on an election. But on the other hand, he's also a much leaner machine. He has much fewer militants. He might want to use his new parliamentary status to build an expertise, to attract more funds, perhaps better rookies for next election. So maybe he might want to wait for a little bit as well.
Beryl, I'm trying to get your thoughts to help me understand this shooting last night. I guess some people saw the party, Marois, sort of exacerbate tensions between Anglo and Francos. Now, I no way would insinuate that she had any prompting of this gunman, but I'm wondering how tense things are in Quebec between the English-speaking minority and the French-speaking majority.
Well, if you'd permit me to separate those two questions and give you a short response on the question of the gunman. there's, there was kind of a little bit of a mad rush when this incident happened, and of course all this speculation trying to connect this madman to politics. Look, bad things happen, crazy things happen. Maybe it'll come out that this man had a particular axe to grind with Marois. In all probability, it'll come out he was looking for a public event, and that's about it. So let's put that aside and get back to your core question. Here's what my great sadness in this campaign, and just one little piece of background. This is the 180th year in Quebec that we're celebrating the emancipation of all minorities, ethnic and religious. 20 years ahead of England. Decades ahead of the United States. Here in Quebec, Louis-Joseph Papineau in 1832. And we've just gone through a campaign where the rhetoric wasn't about sovereignty, Don. The rhetoric was about messages of marginalization, metaphors of segregation. We went through a campaign where very intelligent people at the top of the Parti Québécois started to talk about counting the numbers of non-Francophone households on the island of Montreal. Talking about, of course, as Martin alluded to, closing access to CEGEPs for Francophone families. And if you remember, last spring, the beginning of the Orange Wave was the PQ convention where Duceppe came down, raised Marois' arm, and they had two issues, referendum closing CEGEPs to Francophone families. The next evening was a Sunday evening. The polls started. By Tuesday, you had the Orange Wave. It was rejection by Francophones of this kind of narrow-mindedness. And you know what? The sadness was in the rhetoric coming out of the PQ, that they let this kind of rhetoric out there, because the broad mass of voters, Francophone voters, rejected it in terms of the vote count. Don't look at the seats. But when the PQ in the last election was at 32%, this time they're 31.5%. She's actually a point and a half below where she was at the beginning of the campaign.
Okay.
French Quebec is changing.
If I may add to that, Don, it also contributed to fragmenting the support for the Parti Québécois. On the island of Montreal, there are two ridings which would normally have been for the Parti Québécois that went to a left-wing party that is also in favor of sovereignty, but it's better known as a left-wing party. It's called Québec Solidaire. So it is possible that the identity agenda that was put forward by Madame Marois may have actually contributed to fragmenting support for her party as well.
Okay, well, Martin Croteau and Beryl Wiseman, we appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Very interesting day in Quebec politics. We don't see these very often. Thanks again.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.